All righty, we're live. Silver Doctors, live on air. My name is Mike, the co-host. I got my better half, Mr. Paul Half Dollar. Paul, how you doing, my friend?
Doing good today, Mike. How you doing?
Doing excellent. Looking forward to having some good back and forth. A lot of things worthy of touching on. And so, as always, for those that are tuning in, welcome to Silver Doctors Live on Air, Wednesday edition. It's the
Mm-hmm.
25th day of the month of September, and this is the last official week of the month of September, heading into October, which is predicted to be a very volatile time frame for a variety of reasons. And so we'll definitely touch on all that. But as always, give it a second before we get too deep and welcome anybody that's tuning in. Let me know where you're watching from, and we'll definitely acknowledge your presence. And so let me check into the chat real quick. We got Stinky, if I'm saying that correctly. Says the Dow is up 130 points right now. Sounds pretty okay to me. Yeah, but yet as soon as Trump fires off a tweet, it's going to drop down 230 points. So don't get too excited. We got SG fans. We got John Michael. How you guys doing? So I appreciate everybody hanging out with us, and so we'll have more time for people to come in. But Paul, let's
Mm-hmm.
touch on a couple of topics thus far. What do you want to start off with this afternoon?
Well, I just wanted to just start off with, I titled our last show today. Actually, I don't remember what I titled it. I wanted to title just "Washington Fiddles While America Burns," and I think I put something to that title effect. But here's my point, right? There's 35 Senate seats that are up for
Mm-hmm.
election. Congress, the House of Representatives up for election. We got a presidential election. There's going to be hundreds of politicians that are now going to spend their entire time either focused on an election or the reelection.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, we've got all this push for starting new wars. On top of that, now we've got this impeachment thing, right, that just started yesterday. So here's my point. It's like the problems that America has, that's like the last thing on our politicians' mind. I mean, they're not looking at anything to solve these issues. And it's funny because people try and point me out and say I'm, anti-Trump. I'm not anti-Trump, right? And also, I say President Trump does speak truth about what he does on Twitter, right? We talk about this with the dollar all the time. Let me give you this one recent example, right? On September 18th, so this was last week, President Trump said all polls and some brand new polls show very little support for impeachment. Such a waste of time, especially with so much good that could be done, including prescription drug price reduction, healthcare and infrastructure, etc. But that's my point, right? I mean, there are so many problems in the United States with the markets and with the economy, but, Washington, D.C. is worried about impeachment, they're worried about their own re-elections, they're worried about the Middle East. Like, America's the last thing that's on anybody's mind in Washington. On the left, the right, conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, just all around, nothing is being done for America.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to lead it off with, because that's the overwhelming feeling that I felt this morning.
Right. I agree with that. And so my question would then lead into why is that? And so what are the liberal slash Democratic side? What's the threat that's being posed by President Trump's either his presidency in general or just what he's done so far? Because he's saying the economy's strong, all this stuff like that. The Democratic side never acknowledged anything he's done other than the things that they're calling out him, saying he has too much power because he's called out Joe Biden and his son, and all the things that the disruptive nature of politics in general. And so, what are they afraid of? That's what I'm concerned about. What are they afraid of, and what does he stand to expose if he gets reelected? Because you only have 2 terms to get as much done as you can. So I would assume that they are in fear of him getting a second term and then really beginning to expose their corruption. And then watching that whole inquiry for impeachment by Pelosi, watching her speak and her giving her background of 25 years of public service and how she's been around since she called off all types of things that she's been a part of. And my thought is, look at the state of this country.
Yeah, yeah.
You've been a part of all that, and you're proud of that because this country is not doing as good as
Yes.
we all know what it is. But perhaps perhaps their personal economy is a lot different because they are in privileged positions.
Yes, they've been, she's been making things worse for 25 years. That's not public service. I remember one time in like the second debate, because the writers, for Hillary's side, came back with the whole, well, while you were off in Hollywood doing TV, I was serving America for, the same type of thing. Like, I was serving the State Department for 10 years. It was like, you were making things worse for 10 years is what you were doing.
Goodness.
I think it comes down to this, right? Because I take a darker look at this, and I think that there's a lot of theatrics and circus sideshow stuff going on. Because here's the thing, right? The real corruption, all the stuff that's at the heart of the matter, that stuff can't like all this Hillary Clinton stuff and this lock her up stuff, like this stuff literally brings down America, right? So they can't have any of this stuff exposed. So there's all this little peddly stuff going on, Oh, President Trump's trying to coerce the Ukraine and not give them funds by saying they're special treating Joe Biden's son. And, they're just after me in this witch hunt. And it just goes around and around. So, I think it's because the real problems aren't going to be exposed and we need these distractions. Thoughts on that, Mike?
Distractions 100%. And so, while the mainstream news will be shining light on this whole impeachment process, of course, I'm not even sure exactly what the steps will be to try to drag this on. But the mainstream media is going to be focused on this. And so let's start talking about some of the things that mainstream media will not be talking about. And I'm still anticipating on hearing about the whole Iran situation, whether or not we're going to be doing some things over there because we sent additional troops to Saudi Arabia. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. What else? We got the Federal Reserve activity behind the scenes. Of course, that should be a major concern for the Congress because they gave them power to oversee our financial matters. And right now, they're offering a lot of liquidity in the tunes of record amounts of currency within a 24-hour period, which, once again, only hurts those that continue to save in that same currency they're issuing. So that's two issues. And what else? Any other issues that come to mind worthy of mention?
Hold on. Let's stop right there for a second. Stop right there because I got to talk about this repo thing because, we've been talking about like they're not really discussing it in the mainstream. And if they are, they're downplaying it, right? And they're being like, well, this isn't really the start of QE. This is just temporary. Everything's temporary, right? We went off the gold standard temporarily in 1971, right? The Fed's balance sheet expansion, that was temporary. What happened to that? So, they're downplaying it or they're saying it's temporary. If it does get coverage, we're not even getting the whole story. Like, for example, Zero Hedge covered it yesterday and they said something about like 62 billion or 82 billion. I can't remember what it was, but they only reported one of the operations. The other operation was like 82 billion in a 14-day term structure repo operation. And the collateral that was used was treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. But the point is, so even if you do look at the coverage, if you don't go down and look into it deeper, then you're not even going to realize that it's not even the whole story of what's going on.
Yeah, very true. And so I'll actually pull up a little article here that I'll actually have up on my screen. And it talks about the dollar, this is from Zero Hedge. It says the dollar liquidity crisis accelerates as month end nears record 92 billion demand. And so it gives a little breakdown of where, submitted was 91, but they only approved 75 according to what they've done. I think this is just for that 24-hour window, correct? So there's some additional funds for that 14-day window. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I didn't get a chance to look up on that.
I'm not sure which one that one is because that's from today. I think that's what you're looking at.
This is from today, yep.
So, the whole oversubscribed thing is accepted and submitted. So submitted is when they say, we actually need more than that. So that's when it talks about we're offering you 70 billion, but they're really asking for 82 billion. So that would be what I'm not looking at the numbers right now. So I'm just making this up. But if they say we're 70 billion and like 85 billion was submitted, then 85 billion is the actual number. And it's what they call oversubscribed. So that's when they say there's actually more demand for liquidity than they even have been expecting with what their limits are going to be. And I think it's 70 billion. And then yesterday, because this is supposed to be overnight. But yesterday they had two, and one was overnight and the other one was 14 days. And one of the things I brought up yesterday with Craig Hemke was that this is like reminding me of like payday lending, and payday lending, that's like, I saw it in the Army all the time. Soldiers would get hemmed up and they'd buy like 2 or 3 cars and they'd have payments and they have, just spending money. And then all of a sudden they start the payday loan thing. And it just snowballs from there. It's like, this is what our entire financial banking system has become. One massive payday lending scheme.
Yeah, I did a joke over the weekend. I had some thoughts that I had to get out. So, on Rethinking the Dollar channel, I did actually I did some artwork with the whole payday lending in mind. And I put, if you need up to 75 billion of stimulus, dial 1-800-4-POW. I couldn't help but share it. Even though this is not a laughing matter, but when I drew that up, it was just unbelievably funny as to how the payday lending, that's exactly what it is. One of the only differences is that when they do it for the consumer, such as you and I, it's like a extremely high interest rate, but yet they do it overnight for the banking sector. It's like 1.8% interest or whatever, and they're not even guaranteed to have to pay that back, because my thought was, if you can't afford to pay your bills today, how will you be able to pay your bills tomorrow? So that 24-hour loan doesn't really count as a loan. So,
and remember to hit on the interest rate thing. Yes, because September 17th, so that would have been last Monday or last Tuesday, but that is when the initial communication from the Fed came out saying, hey, we're going to start these repo operations again. And what they said was, in order to help, this was before the rate cut. So they said, in order to help maintain the target rate between 2 and 2.25%, right? So, the whole point of it is to suppress interest rates. Yeah. So, not only is it payday lending, but they got some pretty sweet terms there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I pulled up the little graph showing the overnight operations starting last week, and it starts off with the 17th, and it's at about, I think that was 53 billion. And that was accepted and submitted. And then from that point on, the submitted has been extremely high ever since, but they've capped it off at 75. And so go ahead.
No, and see, that's why I don't like the coverage that it's being getting, because I didn't look at it for today, right? Mm-hmm. I did specifically look at it for yesterday, but they're just talking about the overnight repo operations. Mm-hmm. They're not even including the 14-day repo operations in that chart right there.
Yeah.
So, where you find that is at the New York Fed's website, because the New York Fed is the one that's handling the repo operation.
Yeah.
So, just the point is, it can be even more than that 92. Like I said, I haven't looked into it for just specifically for today, but there were 2 types of operations yesterday.
Yeah.
And that whole 14-day thing, that's something we haven't seen in 10 years, right? And what was 10 years ago? Well, that was the financial crisis.
Mm-hmm. So I'm about to pull up, let me see here. I'm about to pull up that 14-day term. So this is just, you mentioned go to the website. So I went to federalreserve.gov, and they give a little information. This is the written portion of them describing. And so I'll put it up on the screen so people can see it. So it says the desk will offer 3 14-day term repo operations for an aggregate amount of at least $30 billion each. So they're saying they'd be willing to offer additional $30 billion on top of that overnight of 75. So that's 105 that'll be available. Yeah. So watch this. So this was just my thought. So
but it was 80 billion yesterday, Mike. It was 82 billion. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. But it wasn't 30. It was 82 billion. But go with your thought.
Okay, so obviously they've changed some things that they haven't informed the public. So what I was thinking was, prior to actually hearing that, was that, so if it's a total of 105 available, you got a 75 on a 24-hour, 30 billion on this. Whatever is not approved or beyond that, do you think that goes into this 14-day window, or it doesn't matter?
No, it doesn't matter, because they're just given whatever they need. So if they approve this, but if they approve 70, but they need 80, they're getting 80. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they're just pumping whatever money needs to be pumped. So it's just over budget is what it is. Yeah. But don't get me wrong. I'm not the perennial expert at all. Not really qualified to talk about it too much, other than learning on the fly with everybody else here. Yeah. But I do know this: the Fed, like you showed, the Fed's balance sheet is expanding, right? They're pumping money into the banking system, right? These are emergency operations here,
These are dire emergency, sink or swim emergency measures. So, I literally thought about where we're currently at right now, and the amount of stealth QE that's being implemented to the system right now. And so that they're telling the mainstream public that these these type of things haven't been done since a decade ago, and we all know what happened a decade ago. And so the fact that they're happening now, and we're still supposed to be in an economic expansion. And so does this tell us that we are currently in a crisis mode already? But my thing is, what happens when it becomes obvious to the world that we're in a crisis mode? Like, what type of stealth QE will we see? It won't be stealth anymore. It's going to be flat out, outright. I'm trying to think of a word. Ludicrous. I don't know. It's going to be unimaginable, the type of quantitative easing that they're going to be having to inject in when everybody actually knows what's going on.
Yeah. And, we had talked about this is, granted, if it's being paid back every single day, like I'm not digging into the numbers that deep, but still, this is not an insignificant amount of money, and it's turning out to be more money than they even anticipated.
And it appears to be that it caught them off guard, because the mainstream news would have us to believe, why aren't the banks doing what they typically do by lending to each other? What's going on? How come no one trusts each other? Then I remember hearing about the whole LIBOR situation with the LIBOR rates, knowing how that was a problem out in the European area. So that's going away pretty soon. And so it looks like I saw that one of the Fed board governors mentioned about establishing a permanent repo facility itself that would probably be utilized to help establish a lending rate amongst banks outright. So that might become the new LIBOR situation. I don't know, but it's one of the things where banks don't trust each other, and they're in this game to profit off the people. Then the people are screwed definitely, and then the banks are going to be solely dependent upon their creator, which happens to be the Federal Reserve System. So a lot of uncertain times ahead. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, there are, and that's why I just woke up kind of frustrated today, because I'm just thinking, all of this stuff that's coming in the economy and the markets, and they're just fiddling there in Washington, because it's like I said in my update this morning, we're always so close to draining the swamp, but we're so far at the same time, and they're always so close from impeaching Trump, but they're always so far at the same time. It's like it never ends. And in the end, all of the debt and stuff that's on autopilot is about to be parabolically on autopilot, right? So, Congress and the Senate, the Senate, House of Representatives, President, they all have to, start working on the problems. But, I don't think that. I think it's the Titanic anyway. So, hey, if there's this kind of like, because really, what is really going to get done before the election next November? That's my question, right? So that's a question we could pose in the chat. Would there be an infrastructure spending bill before the end of the year? Because you remember in 2017, that's how they, they crammed in that tax cut right before the end of the year.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my question. Would there be an infrastructure spend maybe? Because what really can get accomplished now?
There's nothing on the forefront of my mind that I can throw out there. So let's ask the audience directly. So for those that are tuning in, we got about 120 plus people tuning in. So Paul just threw out a question. Between now and next November, next presidential election, what are some things that could possibly be done productive for our country in the midst of all this political chaos and monetary chaos? And so anybody got any ideas? We're open to all suggestions. No right or no wrongs. Let us know in the chat, and then we can elaborate on it more if you like. Or, as always, a number, 567-336-0844. Give us a call and share your thoughts directly. We'd love to hear your voice. And so, go ahead.
Yes, I thank people for participating. Nothing will be done. That's kind of where I'm leading. But I do like what Harry said. Harry said, we can't have any infrastructure projects with pirates at the helm, because that's the other thing, right? It's like, this money is just going to be squandered corruptly away and stolen. So if you got like $100 billion for a bridge, you're going to have a bridge built that's structurally unsound, that they only spent like $10 billion on, and the rest of it was siphoned off into like, third party offshore accounts and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, they're going to pocket it.
Yeah. And it's going to buddy favoritism, no bid contracts, all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. Let me see what else we got. I saw another one here. So people are throwing out the price of metals at this current point. It says, buying the dips here at silver under $18. What else we got here? I see more talk here. So Rick says, okay, something just went out there. I saw something highlighted.
What will they get accomplished? Rebellion. That's they could get that accomplished too.
Yeah, more argument, more arguing and fighting. Yeah, and so okay, so while we're waiting on somebody to call in or shine some more light on some situations here, the whole I want to touch on Bernie Sanders. Because Paul, I know Bernie Sanders is your guy. I know you vote for Bernie. So
the free stuff mafia.
Yeah, exactly. So what? So now I mentioned Bernie. Just kind of wrong. Paul know that. The fact that we have political chaos in Washington D.C. and then also we have the Democrats that are running on the free policies, and so it's going to be to demonize the wealthy as the reason for our problems. And so we got Bernie Sanders proposes a wealth tax that looks like, I'd imagine a lot of people might get excited about it because it's one of them things where to go back towards the Obama era of everybody needs to pay their fair share, which is something that always bothered me. I'm not sure what fair and share has to do with this current monetary system. But so I pulled an article up here from New York Times, and it says Bernie Sanders proposed a wealth tax, where he's quoted saying, "I don't think that billionaires should exist." And so when I saw that type of statement, I'm thinking like, man, like these people are about to go straight radical here. Because billionaires, regardless of however they arrived at that point, they obviously did something different than the average person, and they worked the system and profited from it. And so now they're going to try to punish them by taxing them, which will only lead to more problems for our country because what it's going to do is cause those people to have to get up and leave. I mean, and so a part of this article is that if you have more than 32 million in your income annually, they're going to take 1%. So they're going to take $320,000 as if that's going to solve our national debt problem or whatever they plan on doing with that. And so just this type of stuff here, we're going to get more of this. And I think as more people begin to feel the economic pinch in their personal lives, it'll be easier for the Warrens and the Bernie Sanders and all them other people to say, it's the rich people's fault. Let's tax them more. And people are going to be like, yeah. Not knowing that it's destroying our country even more.
Yeah, and let me bring it down even a little bit because think about this. So you said 32,000, so 32 million.
So 32 million is the first 1%. They're gonna tax 1% of 32 million, and it goes up. It's a tier. So the more millions you got on top of that, the higher the percentage goes of the income tax you got to pay.
So that's 320,000 a year. That's 1%. That's just one federal tax, right? Mm-hmm. So, but what about the states and the local communities and stuff? They're going to start getting that same itch. So who's to say, right, that, the county's going to come in and say, you know what, we're going to have, and who knows what they would call it, but like an excise tax or an additional property tax on houses above, say, 3,500 square feet. Or, that's not big enough, say, above 5,000 square feet, right? And then all of a sudden, not only are they paying their $320,000 a year to the federal government, now they got to pay this additional, luxury tax to the county government. Then the state's coming in to get their part because the teachers don't have enough funding in the retirement programs, right? So where are they going to get them from there? So it just never ends, And the whole thing is just, because the government, like I said, it can only get in the way or get out of the way. And Ron Paul said it best. He said, every time the government solves one problem, they create two simultaneous problems.
Yeah. Now,
something like that.
My question would then be, are they actually solving a problem or splitting that problem up and creating 3 or 4 variations of that same exact problem? And so it's unfortunate that we can go back and forth, and we're going to have more than enough stories to talk about from now until whenever. But it's all going to boil back to the fact that the current political structure and the way it's designed, the way it has been operating, will always fail. It's unfortunate that our best version of politics and this form of democracy, which is broken, will always create problems. So nothing that comes from that region of our country will ever really be fair and of equal value until it's literally downsized and shrink to a non-existent status, in my opinion. So, yeah. But, Bernie Sanders out there want to tax everybody. So if you're watching and if you're in that 32 above, you might want to start, looking for a residency outside the country because they're coming for you.
Yeah, and you can look at the statistics, and there's been a trend in more people renouncing their citizenships because of these tax issues.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've been watching that for some time now, and I think it was a year or two ago. It was an all-time high of people repatriating, or what's it called? I forgot what the word is called, but denouncing citizenship, whatever the official word is, and
expatriating.
Expatriate, okay. And so I was reading the process, and so it looks like prior to there being all-time highs, it was relatively cheap to do all the paperwork. It was maybe $10,000 to do all the paperwork. But now to deter people from wanting to do that, they upped it to something a lot more expensive, and they drag it out longer now, trying to deter people from actually doing it. So they want to investigate, make sure you don't have any assets not claimed and reported, and so they're trying to make it to where it's very difficult now. So it's probably not as easy as it used to be a couple years ago.
And so those are the social consequences. So drill it down to, well, what does that mean? What that means is, yes, the richest, but on the other hand, if it's just people making $32 million making judgments, what you have are the smart, the people that are go-getters, right? The people that are, making things happen, they're gone. Right, they're gone, and who's left? The people who are saying, give me their money, well, they're gone. So
those
what are you
same
going to do?
people,
So now you don't even have the money, but now you lose the talent.
Right, and those same people probably fall into the categories of being the business owners or the executives that call shots, no matter how they got to where they arrived at. Those are the people that are probably employing thousands of people. Therefore, if they have to up and leave, they might relocate their corporations. Therefore, that's going to be a lot of jobs lost if they decide to go to Europe or wherever else. So, I don't think politicians really think about that, because once again, politicians, they don't think from an actual, what's it called, a private sector worker, as far as actually having gone out and made a living and worked 9 to 5, got up every day and earned a paycheck through their own labor. But as a politician, it's easier to sit behind and pass judgments on things in front of you, and then try to implement your policies upon things where, you get a nice little salary and benefits. I think, what's the term? Is it after 3 or 4 or 5 years, you get a lifelong retirement plan and healthcare plan?
No, one term. So you serve one term in Congress.
So
you serve one term in Congress.
Corrected. So one term, you set for life. That's a hell of a job to have. So, who wouldn't want to be a political figure if you can get benefits like that?
Yeah, and they're not looking out into the future, right? They're only looking at their reelection.
Their term and reelection.
I see a highlight for silver doctors.
All right.
I'm starting to get better in the chat, and it's so I see how it jumps out. So it says, I have been stacking PM for a year now. What are some rough numbers to reach in silver and gold ounces? I understand more is better. Just some goals to shoot for. Yeah, that's a good, recurring question, right? But the more the better. My personal philosophy, in my opinion, is I want to keep no savings in the bank, basically, because one, I don't trust the banking system, and two, they're not giving me interest that's keeping up with the rate of inflation anyway. But, so I want to take my money, and plus, right, by having more gold or silver and less money in the bank, I'm also voting with my wallet and choosing to opt out of this corrupted, fraudulent system. So I say, the more that is able is better. But that's the thing, right? You have to be willing and able. And then you also have to be willing and able to, because there comes times when people buy and when people sell. And people aren't always just one time in their life a buyer and one time in their life a seller. No, when you get into gold and silver, it ends up becoming a savings vehicle. It ends up being something that you use for strategic purposes. There's lots of reasons, right? So, and because over time, you're going to have those kind of gains, right? So, but the question is, you can't put all of it in the gold or silver right now, because what if you got to sell it, and you bought it at 19, now the price is 17.50, right? So that's the hard part, right? Being able to smooth out that weight to be able to reap those rewards. Did that make sense at all, Mike?
It does 100%, and I'm kind of around the same lines. And so for me personally, gold and silver, they are money. It is money. So it's more so, how much money do you want to have saved for your future?
Yes.
And so I value and measure those metals in terms of weight and not in dollar, the dollar symbol itself, like the dollars itself, the value. I don't determine the value of what I want to set aside in Federal Reserve note tone terms. Rather, dang, slipped your tongue there. So yeah, so once one of the things with how much weight do you want to sit on is more so the question you should be concerned with, because if you look at it as money, it's the same as saying, do you want to be like, I've watched and I've been reading a lot about retirements, and I'm hearing more and more news about that, and I hear recent studies saying that not banks, but institutions are saying that $1 million will be enough to retire off of comfortably. That's what the surveys are saying, 1 million. So I'm thinking like, okay, 1 million Federal Reserve notes, that's 1,000 pieces of paper that in the repo market, all that stuff happening. They're injecting billions per day, and eventually that's going to spill out. Now, if you aim for a certain number of paper notes to sit around in the midst of an environment where they're printing them and they're creating them digitally at a very alarming rate, that 1 million will turn into 10 cents in a hyperinflationary environment within a problem. But if you're sitting on 1 million ounces, that 1 million ounces will continue to be 1 million ounces. But on top of that, when it comes to valuing it in some type of currency of some kind around this planet, it's going to go up exponentially in the amount of digits it'll take to buy just one of those ounces you're sitting on. So the question is not who wants to be a millionaire, but who wants to be a million ouncer or something like that.
Yeah. And the number that you put out, 1 million, is good because it's interesting. I have a couple old matchbooks that I've collected because they're like bank matchbooks from the 80s, and it talks about open up a bank account and get 5% interest on your savings account and stuff like that. And it's like, wow. But that's the thing, right? If you had $1 million in savings and you were earning a normal rate of interest of 5% on your savings account, you could earn $50,000 a year and live off of that. But now, you can't earn anything on those savings at all. Mm-hmm. You're forced to go put it into risky assets, and if you want to generate any income, and then you have risk of losing your capital. So, I don't see $1 million, and what happens so that's the one thing. So then the other thing is, where you're going to use it for your capital. What happens if you have a health problem? I mean, surgeries are very expensive. Just going to the ER is very expensive. It's got 5 digits and a comma, depending on what you're doing. So
that's just on a savings. That's just when you use the word savings. But yet you need some spending capital, because legal tender wise, you still have to spend in order to take care of all your daily necessities, and that's where the emergency fund comes into play. Having some paper sitting around for a foreseeable event of things needed, and to cover some issues or hiccups that might come about. So you need that as well. So you're going to need that until nobody will accept a piece of paper from you. So the ratio is according to what you feel comfortable with, but as long as you know the importance of distinguishing between currency and money, I think you'll be, in better hands and better position outside of those that have no clue. So, so we have another question here. Mm-hmm. This is from Low Blood Pressure, and it says, Mike, it says, what do you think the acre to silver ratio will be after the collapse? Average farmland. So the acre to silver ratio.
Man, that is a tough question. I don't even know what the acre to silver ratio is. I'm glad you put your name in there, Mike.
So what I'm gonna do, like always, if I don't know where to begin, I'm gonna look it up and see what pops up on the good old internet.
Yeah, but the other thing though is, I mean, that is such a hard question to answer, because it really does depend on geography, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what is the thing they say about real estate? Location, right? So, an acre at one place is not the same as an acre somewhere else, an acre in somewhere in Nevada, just outside of Area 51, where there's high radiation and no water, that's not going to be worth a lot of money, or a lot of silver. But then again, if you got some real fertile farmland in the Midwest, then now we're talking.
Yeah. Now, here's another thing worthy of thinking about. Just as I looked at the article, but this article doesn't really relate. But if we're pricing land in Federal Reserve notes terms in the near next 10, 15 years, when I believe everything will be fully exposed and washed out by that time, then, I mean, the question will be, everything's going to go on sale pretty soon, because everything, for the most part, has a mortgage on it. And so if all those mortgages go belly up, there's going to be a lot of people out of land and housing and everything else. So everything's going to be on sale. And so I believe that, hell, if gold reaches the all-time high plus some, it's going to be whatever ratio will be very favorable for having the smallest amount of gold to get the most amount of land. So I don't know what that'll equate to in acres or whatnot. I'm not into agricultural farming, so I don't know the whatever. But just according to history, according to what I've heard about the Weimar Republic, where I think an ounce of gold in that time frame bought an entire industrial street or something like that, or a residential street of real estate. So I'd imagine you're still going to be looking pretty good no matter what you actually are able to buy. So it'll be very favorable for those that are sitting on something heavy and tangible in the form of metal. So just my little 2 cents there. And I see, let me see, Manico64 is in the chat. How you doing, Mario? He says grams and troy ounces, referring to the weight aspect of it. What else we got going on?
He's asking a question about that?
No, he just commented on, I think in regards to something we said a moment ago, because I think the chat might be a little bit behind.
Because, a lot of people don't understand that, like, a troy ounce is not the same thing as an ounce, right? So, like, there's 28 ounces, there's 28 grams in an ounce, but a troy ounce is like 31.1 grams. I could be off on the exact percentage there, but
31.1.
31.1.
Yeah.
But, the bottom line is, so it is different, right?
Yeah. Let me see here. So, as always, we haven't gotten a single call yet. And so that means nobody wants to let their voice be heard or want to talk to us. So they rather hear us rant back and forth.
I see some good participation. I'm scrolling back here a little bit.
Somebody says Wyoming made gold and silver legal tender. Yeah, and I wonder in the years ahead, will more states look to reinstate gold and silver as legal tender, even though it's always been that way, but yet actually be willing to accept it for debts, for both public and private. That will be something worthwhile. And I think, okay, so go ahead. I got an article I want to share with you guys.
Okay,
but go ahead and find it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see Matt from Silver Fortunes here. That's nice. Good to see him. Low blood pressure. I had another question. But anyway, before I forget this thought, or I am forgetting it already, what were you just talking about with the because I had a point to make on it.
I'm looking for an article I wanted to bring up that talks more about the issues we're having with the states.
Yeah, because that's the thing I was going to say. Yeah, the states.
All right,
yes,
now
I think you're right. You're right, Mike.
Hold on 1 second. So we do have a call. So before we get too deep into that, let's see what this caller has to say. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hi, Typo from Massachusetts, and I just have a quick question.
Go ahead, Typo from Massachusetts. How you doing? What's on your mind tonight or this afternoon?
Great show today, and love it. Just curious, if the banks close their doors and have to do some kind of holding back on accounts, and won't a mortgage also have the same problem, because this is not the usual issue that we've gone through time and time again. This is a reset. So if the banks have a problem and they're bankrupt, then can they even hire out for collections to get our houses?
Typo, a great question there. So, Paul, did you hear what she said?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I think back a couple years ago, and I don't know whatever came to this, but like when I think about the Greek crisis and the bank runs and all that stuff from like 2014, 15, 16, and weren't they at one point telling people just stay in your houses? The banks aren't going to do anything. Just stay in your houses. But I don't know what that's going to look like. I think that's a great question, and it comes down to.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, go ahead. She's leaving. Go ahead.
Yeah, it comes down to, that's a really good question. It comes down to, what are they going to change the term structures to the new currency? Because I'm sure, we've bought 3 houses, and I tell you, every time you buy a house, I mean, it literally takes you like hours, well, not hours, but it takes an hour to sign all of the paperwork. And there's like 50 pages you got to sign, and you don't read any of it, right? I mean, it would literally take you a month if you're going to read every page before you signed it, right?
Yeah.
So, my point with that is I'm sure there's something buried in there where, depending on whatever happens with this kind of like economy, right, which in this case we're talking about a reset, then it can be restructured one way or another. You would think that it would be, right?
Yeah. I remember listening to Lynette Zane a while ago referred to the whole LIBOR situation and how mortgages are all contractual agreements between the public and the banking sector stand to be readjusted or manipulated or needed to be readdressed pretty soon between now and that time frame, because all the fine prints of all the mortgages and stuff like that gives information about the interest rates and how there's more, it's more favorable for the lenders than it actually are for the borrowers as far as a more person taking out the mortgage. So at any moment, perhaps you can probably get a call or something saying, hey, we need to address this. And then you mentioned about denominating and whatever the next currency might be. No matter what, and this is, I don't know how it's going to play out, but the banks will not lose.
Yeah.
So they're going to win. So that, with that being the case, without knowing the details, you're going to pay something or they're going to take your house. So
yeah, you make a great point, because it is heavily stacked. The consumer, right? In this case, the borrower, but it's just pretty much with any business. The consumer is no longer right anymore. The consumer no longer has any rights.
All right.
We got a call?
Yeah, we do have a call. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from?
How you doing? This is Kenny from Pensacola, Florida.
Kenny from Florida. How you doing, my friend? What's on your mind this afternoon?
Yeah, I'm doing well. So I had a question about the Harry Dent interview.
For Paul?
Guys had you had a Harry Dent interview maybe about like 2 weeks ago, and he had a call where pretty much he was saying that he thinks that gold is going to be $700, and it doesn't make sense to me. I think I talked to Mike about it on the show, but the co-host, I think he was doing an interview on him. I want to get his take on it and like try to make sense of it if he can.
Sounds good. Kenny, appreciate your call, my friend. Thanks. All right, Paul, go ahead and shine some light on that interview you had with Harry Dent.
Yeah, Harry Dent thinks, well, he's really big on demographics, and his whole approach is that we're going to have this massive deflation. But, Harry Dent talks about, and everything, including gold and silver, right? So, we know that the stock market's been reinflated and we have an asset bubble there. We know that real estate's being reinflated and we have a bubble there, right? But he thinks for some reason that the only two things that aren't, that bonds are going to be safe, right? He thinks that bonds are not going, the bubble in bonds is not going to burst. He thinks that bonds are going to be safe. So, what he's saying there with gold going down $700 is he thinks that it's in a bubble and it's just going to deflate along with all the other assets. I would definitely not agree with that, because I do not think that gold is in a bubble. And furthermore, I even got him to admit, like in a roundabout way, because I asked him, I followed up my question with him and I said, hey, Harry, doesn't that mean that as everything is deflating, well, the price of gold goes down slower, so your purchasing power increases? And he actually agreed with that statement. So it kind of just like negates his whole premise there, so to say. But yeah, so he thinks that gold is in a bubble. I don't know why he's doing this or why he's saying that, because he also looks at the dollar and the U.S. bond market as like a closed system, in the sense that like there's nothing else in this world other than the dollar or the bond market. So that's the other problem that I see. Who's to say that investors are going to go into the U.S. bond market? The bond market's in the bubble. Who's to say that investors are trying to go into the dollar when all we're doing is blowing things up and killing people all around the world, right? They're ready to move on from the bond market in the U.S. and the dollar. So his view is a closed view that the dollar is centric to everything. The bond market is centric to everything, and everything else is in a bubble. I don't know if that helps answer any of that.
Yeah, it does, because as you're describing that even more, I'm thinking like, as of now, a person of his nature, who's a financial guy, been in the markets forever, as I mentioned, I think I told Kenny this, that he's a guy who's selling a newsletter. So his primary objective is to continue to be that voice that's contrary to everybody else, so it gets some attention. Because if he started jumping on the bandwagon of everybody else, he wouldn't be as controversial as he is. Therefore, people would just dismiss him. So he needs to come out with some type of bold claim, as saying that gold is going to go down. But as someone had just mentioned in the chat, Albert just mentioned that bonds are going to be safe until QE4 is announced. And my thing with that is QE4 will not be announced as QE4. It's being done now in the form of this stealth QE. And so I would imagine the world sees what's going on with this repo situation. China, Russia, they all see it. And they've been liquidating their treasury holdings for several years by actually putting them to use in the infrastructure aspect. So they've been taking advantage of the manipulation and the corruption in our government here, preparing for whatever they're going to throw out there. So, the value, the standard of value in measuring trade internationally will no longer be a Federal Reserve note within 5 years. Therefore, China and Russia will set the standard of measuring value according to gold. So
it always. It always goes back to gold. But just to follow up, because I do want to get this out there too, because that's his fundamental reasons, right? But there's also the technical reason.
Before I cut you off, we got another call.
Okay. Remind me about the technical reason about Harry.
Technical reason, okay. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, this is Rick from St. Louis, Missouri.
How you doing, Rick? What's in your mind this afternoon?
Looking at this national debt clock on .org, how do they generate that number for silver ratio, gold ratio? That those numbers, what silver and gold possibly should really be. Mm-hmm. Is that what we should be focusing on with this suppressed value? That those are the numbers that we should look for that they could rise to?
Great question there. I'm gonna answer this offline. I appreciate you calling and asking that, my friend. Thank you. All right. Paul, go ahead and touch it go ahead and touch that one. I wanted to ask him on top of that. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me see if I answer it the same way you do, because I think this is a great question, because it does come up a lot, and I cannot stand that number at all. The reason why I can't stand that number is because it is not measured correctly. The reason why it is not measured correctly is because when they calculate that number, they take the U.S. national debt and they divide it by global silver supply. So that's not an apples to apples comparison. You either have to do one of two things. If you're going to measure it, you have to take the U.S. national debt and divide it by U.S. silver supply, or you take the global national debt if you're going to be using the global silver supply. So since we're talking about the U.S. debt, they need to not use the global silver number. That's why I don't like that, because basically what it's doing is it's showing that there's a ton more silver out there than there is in relation to just one country's debt. But if we're talking about one country, we need to narrow it down and talk about actually one country, right? So, it's like saying, I got a bunch of cars, but, they just come to my neighborhood and I'll show them to you. But if all the cars are all my neighbor's cars and their driveways, they're not really my cars, It's just there's a bunch of cars in my neighborhood. I got a bunch of cars in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't like this concept with these numbers, because they're using global supply for a national debt number.
Right. So I got two thoughts I want to add on top of that, but we got another call, so I'm going to forego my thoughts, and I'll hopefully come back to it. So
me, Harry, you, the debt silver ratio.
Sounds good. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from?
I just wanted one more question, please.
Yep.
First, that national debt clock answer blew me away. I loved it, and I have never actually considered global debt by the nations in that math. Thank you. The question I have is, didn't Basel to require gold to be a portion of dollars? And does anyone know what that number is? What portion? What percentage? Thanks.
Appreciate it, Typo. Paul, does anything come to mind with the Basel III situation, or Basel II? I think it's Basel III. I'm not sure, but as far as the actual amount of gold and denominated in what price is the question, I believe.
Yeah, no, I don't know. They're on Basel III right now, with the implementation of the Basel III recommendations and stuff. That is above my pay grade, but there are a few things that I can say about it. Everybody was like, "Oh, this is great. Gold's tier 1 asset." Gold's always been a tier 1 asset. It's just the way that they're calculating it and putting it on the books now. But what that says to me, right, is not so much that, central banks are going to be buying all this gold because it's a tier 1 asset. What that's saying to me is that sovereign nations are going to get screwed out of their gold, because now the biz, right, is going to be saying, hey, you got all this gold as a tier 1 asset and your economy's in shambles and your country's bombed out by the United States. So we'll float you this loan right here and you can put your gold up as collateral. Yeah. Right. So that's what that is about. That's why I don't think that in the long run, yes, it's good. But just for the next medium term that the Fed likes to call, I don't think that Basel III has been a good thing for gold overall, because I think it's a way for the biz to strong arm weaker nations out of their gold. And then another thing, and this is kind of related, but it's just U.S. centric. And I keep asking Judy Shelton this question. It's funny how she got out of the news again, right? Nobody ever says a word about her. And I told you nothing was ever going to happen out of that. I said nothing was going to happen. Yeah. But, the U.S. Treasury Department values, people don't know this, right? The U.S. Treasury Department values gold at $42.2222, right? So $42.22. And, so I keep asking the question, should we just revalue our gold on our books to the market price of gold, and never get an answer for that. But anyway, that's just a side note there. Thoughts on that, Mike? I hope I answered it at all.
Yeah, and so there's a recent comment or thought in reference to that where Armed Resistance says, I thought she was asking of the constitutional requirements of gold and silver as money. And so by you mentioning what gold is priced at on the current books now, and so I personally, I've been asked that question several times, and just knowing how it's an asset. And so just think about the Federal Reserve balance sheet. And this is from reading, what's his name, James Ricker's book, The New Case for Gold. So while I was reading through that book, and I came across something that was very alarming, and I didn't really go back to it, and never bothered to have James Rickers on the show just because he only comes out when it's time to promote a book. So he'll never give you the real deal. He'll give you something in his book at that time.
Yeah.
But one thing he mentioned in that book, and I highlighted it, it was referring to the fact that a part of that whole 1933 confiscation of gold in exchange for the gold certificates, it was that the agreement was that the gold certificates will remain on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, while the United States Treasury would then hold the gold in Fort Knox as well as the other banks. And so as of now, those gold certificates that's on the Federal Reserve balance sheet are still assets, which gives them a claim to the same gold that's in Fort Knox. So when I was reading that and thinking about it, it was 8,800 tons before as the window was being closed in 1971, and the remaining balance of what we're told is 8,300 tons or whatever. But for each ounce of gold that the Federal Reserve or the Treasury holds, there's a certificate for that same amount of gold that sits on the Federal Reserve balance sheets. So at this current moment, what I kind of took away from that is that the Federal Reserve still owns a portion or piece or a claim to the U.S. gold. So all that situation needs to be ironed out. So when it comes to the price, in Federal Reserve terms, it's $1,500 a day. But on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, it's listed as $42.22, of which that's a big disconnect there. So either the Federal Reserve going to own some gold when all this crashes, or there's going to be some chaos and actually being able to determine the price if it can be done on this side of the earth as opposed to what's going to be given over there. Because between those certificates still being active and still being claims on physical gold, I'm not sure about the pricing mechanism that we could even try to implement on this side because of all that confusion that's been created. And
so it is on the Fed's books. Because it's also on the Treasury's books. So, we talk about one person's asset is another person's liability. Well, this is like two people's asset, and how do you have that even,
So my thing is, the Federal Reserve, as of now, they own some gold because they got the receipts that say that they own how many ever tons. So if they were to try to revalue the paper price of gold, they're still going to make out because those receipts that they possess, which were taken in exchange for the physical. So that whole interconnection between the Treasury and the Fed working together to come up with that deal is going to screw a lot of people out one way or another, because I don't really think that gold is still there in Fort Knox in the way that we are told it is. But even if it comes out to be the way that it is there, who does it really belong to is what I'm getting at. I don't think the public doesn't own that gold no more. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know what that was about, but that's just what came to mind in hearing that question about how it's being listed, because it is a tier 1 asset on the Federal Reserve balance sheet because of those certificates. So, yeah. Anyway, just my thoughts. I don't know if they answered anything, but finish up your thought about the technology. You said something about the.
The Harry Dent thing, but also on top of that, right? Because that's the way that you can do the reset, right? You take the U.S. debt and you divide it by the amount of gold that you have, right? If you want to do 100% backing. And then like the people who own gold, because then it would be actually revalued on the books at that price. The people who own the gold just make out at that point because, you either are in the train when it leaves the station or you miss the train, right? But no, that Harry Dent thing was just about, he looks at, he says 700 to 1,000 because he talks about that's where, the support is going to be, somewhere between like the years 2007 and the years 2009 or something like that. So that's why he throws that $700 number out there.
Yeah.
And then he says it could go down as far as he used to say 450 because that's where it was before it started going on that run in the early 2000s.
Right.
But yeah,
right. So we got another call. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, this is Dom from Florida.
Dom from Florida. How you doing? What's on your mind this afternoon?
Good. I just wanted to make mention. I think that 6 months back, I read an article about something called Bitcoin, and it's basically so much like a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin that the government holds a patent on, which I believe has already been created. So I think where we're going here is like going to destroy the dollar, bring in this crypto that's going to be run by the Fed, and we're going to be able to trade in our metal to get into this new currency. But yeah, I don't know if you've heard about that or if you've seen that at some point or not, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good question there. So Paul, he's talking about him came across information about Federal Reserve, issuing and doing research and studying and preparing a digital, and it's then labeled as a Fed coin. And so, what are your thoughts on that, Paul? I appreciate you calling in, Freddie, buddy. Thank you.
I mean, it's going to be hard, right? Because how is the Fed, when this all goes down, because I think you have to abolish the Fed. I mean, so how do you even, like the question would be, when this all goes down, even if a person doesn't have my kind of opinions or my kind of views, how's there even going to be the confidence in the Fed again? Right? I mean, because now, people didn't realize what the financial crisis was, but they're going to be feeling it this time. And then they're going to be asking questions. Wait a second. Wasn't this all fixed? Why wasn't this all fixed? So I don't think that the Fed is going to get off this easy. Part of this whole study thing is, because they got to justify their jobs. They got to justify what they're trying to do. But it does add to an interesting dynamic. I do think that they will ultimately try and take us digital. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think they can go 100% digital because people always want that ultimate in privacy, which is physical in hand, even if it's fiat system.
Now, the majority of the population, referring to the younger portion of this country, are okay with digital because that's what we've been conditioned to accept because of the smart technology. So when it comes to all the apps out there, the cash apps and all that stuff like that, the younger population don't mind giving up cash. It's just the older generations that still know the importance of metals, as well as the middle group, millennials and generation whatever it is above us. They know about paper still. So it'll take another 10 years before people won't mind not having something physical in their hands, and then it'll be easier to usher in something. So as far as the Federal Reserve is concerned, I think that as this stuff unwinds, I don't think the public will probably actually be able to pinpoint the origins of the problem to even blame the Fed. So I think the Fed could easily change their name, rebrand themselves, and then be ushered into the Treasury as United States Treasury, whatever, and still be operate out of the same building, just change the name of it and rebrand it and come out as saying now we're part of the government. During this whole crisis, we're separate. We are independent. We don't have to answer anybody. In the crisis, we're a part of the government. The government's going to take our balance sheet, whatever they're going to try to do, and rebrand the same exact thing as a solution, solely digital. And it's going to be one entity called a government, and it's going to be government officially at that time. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually like your explanation way better than my explanation. And I think that you're right? Because people have been dumbed down and they don't know. So I think that your argument has a lot more weight than mine, and yours is more the likely course of action. Yeah,
which is not a good thing though. So I don't like the fact that you kind of agree with me. I don't like that because once again, I'm thinking about as a parent. For all our parents out there, we know where our kids stand, so we can educate them as much as we can. But their peers have no clue, so it's only natural that they'll accept what the norm is amongst their age group, and that's going to be digital. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We'll see, because I see it with my teenage kids, right? Like, one of them's a teen, the other one's not quite a teen, but they do like their cash, though. They do like their cash, and it's funny because, like, wow, it's like, these are a teen and a preteen, and they go to the mall or they go to something, and it's like you give them like $100. Like you used to give them a 20, but now they like ask for $100. It's like, when did sending your kid to the mall cost $100, Mike?
Yeah, I knew the rate or the lack of purchasing power of a 20 or 50 when it was time for my kids to go to birthday parties. And in the car, I remember when I was a kid, if you threw two 20s in there, that was equivalent of going. That was a good shopping spree. Now you put a 20 in a car, that's a meal. You know what I'm saying? That's a hot and ready and something to drink.
Yes. They used to give you like $1 for every year that you worked. Could you imagine like giving like a 10-year-old 10 $1 bills? Happy birthday. It's like, what am I going to do with that?
They would look at you. They'll give it back to you and give you some on top of it. Oh, man. But no, we're having fun this afternoon. Amongst all the chaos, it's still good to keep a sense of humor about everything because that's one way of staying sane. So forgive us if we're laughing too much, but I definitely got to keep my mind right by laughing because laughter is good for the soul, in my opinion. So, I don't know where that came from, but we're approaching an hour point. No, we are at an hour. So, what do you say we get ready to dial back and get ready for whatever else is to come for the remainder of this week and get ready for something in the future? So, Paul, want to send us off on a good note? Any last thoughts you want to leave us with?
Well, it wasn't going to be a good note. That's a bad thing because, I've been on the lookout for black swans this week. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to say I don't think this Trump impeachment thing is a black swan because that is something that, Democrats have been trying to do for the last 2 years, right? So this is not something that's coming out of left field. Markets haven't been as volatile as I thought they would this week. So, really, if we don't see a whole lot of movement, coming off my theory of the psychological warfare against China, I've got a bad feeling about next week and with as far as the coming hit to the metals. Obviously we'll have to see what happens between now and the end of the week, but it's going to be interesting either way, and these are definitely interesting times, Mike.
Yeah, definitely interesting times. As I mentioned earlier on tonight, or today rather, we're going to have a lot of things to talk about one way or another, politically, monetary, financially. And so definitely we won't run out of things to talk about. So the thing is, for those that are watching, if you find this information and this back and forth interesting, definitely share these videos so more people are aware of this type of talk, because you won't get this from this perspective on your mainstream news because they're bought and paid for reading our teleprompters. And we're just off the cuff two gentlemen that are concerned about the direction of our country and this whole system itself. So definitely, if you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up, donate a thumbs up, and then I also throw in there a thumbs down if you didn't like it. Either way, just show some energy and push the button. And come back and join us next time and bring a friend with you. So other than that, everybody be blessed, be safe, and we'll see you guys on the other side. Peace.